We're moving on to our next exciting talk, and in that one, we're seizing the first-party data opportunity in mobile games advertising. I'd like to invite to the stage Fernando Pernica from Nefta.
So first-party data, these tantalizing three words that we hear a lot about, and it's been in the language of our industry for many, many years. And I remember even back in 2015 when I was still a plucky publisher growth manager in my second job in NatTech, we already talked about first-party data and how we could use it to optimize advertising campaigns, to improve advertising results. Except back then, we were looking into how we can collect as much information about the user as possible, gather up all of this, fold it under an advertising ID, and then to optimize those campaigns for return on ad spend. A very different reality than what we can do today. And I remember even back then we were doing, receiving with this data in spreadsheets, and I actually don't really think the system actually worked very well. So I think we've come a very long way from those days. But I am here to tell you and to suggest to you that we still think the first-party data is the solution to drive better growth for game developers, even today, even after all the changes that we've seen happen in the industry in the last few years. And yes, my name is Fernando Pernica. I'm one of the co-founders and also the Chief Customer Officer at Nefta. And we are an advertising network that's looking to seize the opportunity for mobile games in first-party data by working with both advertisers and publishers in trying to uncover and harness that data for them. So I don't have to stand in here and tell you about the reality. So it seems like I'm locked out of the thing, but I'll try this leap thing. Nope. Do you know, does a AV team knows how to move forward with the slides? Oh, there we go, perfect. Great. So publishers, the game developers have been feeling the impact that, ATT, GDPR, LAT, and God knows how many more acronyms, there are there that I couldn't possibly memorize. We're feeling the impact of all these privacy changes. And we can say safely that we are now in a privacy-first era. Those changes will not stop, but they'll continue to move forward, and they'll be more and more aggressive. Google will follow suit very soon, is already doing it. And we've seen, in some cases with some of our partners, we see as much as 70% opt-out rates. So that means that advertisers don't have information on 70% of the users that they are targeting. They have no information, no idea who the user is. And conversely, then we have publishers as well, who are seeing the advertising revenues decline and the CPMs drop by as much as 50%, sometimes even more, depending on the location, depending on the placement, and so on. But the number that really stuck with me when I was doing our research, and this is something that we've been looking to for a few years now, is 35%. I think it was from a report from UpsFlyer 2 years ago or a year ago that said that in the year after ATT was rolled out, that in-app purchases across the entire industry went down by 35%. In-app purchase, not ad revenue and not ROAS. In-app purchases. This shows how much the industry was shifted. And it's not that the industry became smaller, because it didn't. If you look at the macro reports, the industry grew. So where did that money go? Well, the money went into a fundamental rearrangement of our industry. Here we go again. Oh, there you go. It's this one. What happened was that some very clever companies managed to see the opportunity within that and consolidated a lot of the data. They started to verticalize a lot of the... Oh, that one? Okay. Thank you. We'll get there, people. They found very clever ways to address this need, the need to drive growth for publishers and for advertisers. And the way they went about this is to essentially consolidate data. So they started putting together a game studio with an ad network, with a mediation platform, with a DSP, with an SP, and so on and so forth, and creating this massive stack that essentially created this massive silo within the industry for them, where they could observe and see everything that came in and that came out. They could fundamentally see the value that a user had within a game and as well as outside the game. So the marketplace value of the particular user, a very clever way of doing it. Naturally, because they had access to all this data, they found a way to optimize it to their own benefit, generating profits of maybe 60%. I've been hearing that's the number that's been going around, because it's been completely optimized for their own gain, for their own benefits. And these algorithms, walled gardens, some people call it, of course, it's in many ways the only options that publishers nowadays have to monetize, and advertisers have to also find to acquire their users. There's fewer and fewer choices today. But it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all doom and gloom. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking about opportunities within first-party data. We're talking about here, it's temperamental. Apologies.
The big green arrow on there.
Yeah. Okay, great. We will get it there, I promise you. What this companies actually did was actually to show us the way. So they were very clever in doing what they did. Verticalize their operations, bring everything in-house, acquire, consolidate, expand. But what this did was to point the solution towards one thing, first-party data. Because if you own your data, then you're virtually future-proof. Apple cannot take that away from you. Google cannot take that away from you. Not even the EU can take that away from you. It's basically the extent that we've done our research. If you deal with your own first-party data, you are virtually future-proof. Also, you're compliant, because you can find ways to be compliant with all the regulations and with all the store's policies as well. But for me, the most exciting one is untapped. Even though we talked a lot about how to use first-party data in advertising, we haven't really done a lot with it. We acquiesced and we just decided, okay, well, the old ways are best. Let's just focus on gathering advertiser data and put it together and hope that everything's going to be fine. It has been fine for some, but I guess not for most of the industry. And people in this room here, if you're a publisher, you will know how things have really changed dramatically for you. So before we delve into how we can actually use first-party data for better results in mobile advertising, let's talk about a little bit about the results. So right now, what we don't have is the ability to serve relevant advertising and therefore generate better results for publishers. We're here to propose that if we're using first-party data from a game, for example, we are able then to generate relevant advertising again, and therefore generate higher CPM for publishers. So from serving more relevant ads that generate better return on ad spend for advertisers, we can then, of course, generate higher eCPMs for publishers. That means more revenue. But going a little bit further even, not just generating more revenues, we can generate insights about the players. We can understand if we're aligning ourselves to publishers and to publishers' interests and publishers' needs in order to really understand how those players behave and how their players, generate the best possible return on investment, then we can really find out how we can improve campaigns at a very deeper level. Well, this sounds great. I want 30% more revenue. I want better return on ad spend. I want all of these things. So how do I get started? Well, the first way, of course, is for you to work with one of the big walled gardens. Right? You take the keys off and throw it to them and forget about it. Right? You have absolutely zero control what's happening, but you're making a buck or two extra there. And I think if you've been around for some time as well, I remember when we were talking about head the bidding for mobile and how it's going to be, the publisher savior, and it's going to bring accuracy, it's going to bring transparency. It was born again salvation for publishers. And unfortunately, you can see today and say safely that publishers are even more in the dark than ever. They have no idea what prices they're getting for what campaigns or from what advertisers. They're completely and utterly in the dark. But what is the alternative? Well, the alternative would then be to build this yourself. Of course, and if you don't have $2 billion or $3 billion lying around, it might be a little bit hard. But some publishers have successfully built these platforms themselves. They have been able to harness their own first-party data in order to generate better results. One thing they have in common is that they tend to have billions and billions of users because they need a lot of scale in order to make something like that work. Well, when we're thinking about this problem, and we're looking into, okay, what do we need then in order to build this? If we're going to build it ourselves, what challenges, what problems do we need to solve? Well, first of all, the first problem we have to do is to look into scalability. If you're, going from looking at, your first-party data within your game and how your player behaves, and what is the value of your player within the context of the game, and try to understand that within a marketplace, you need to, of course, make that information available to the marketplace. So advertisers can bid, they can and compete for the true value of a user. In order to do that, you have to build an infrastructure. You have to build, a bidder, manage servers, hire people to do this. And that's extremely costly, extremely time-consuming to do that. You also have to take in consideration the fact that machine learning, how you're going to yield better performance for your campaigns, thrives on scale, on massive volumes. And if you have, 2 million DAOs, 3 million DAOs, that might actually be a reality for you, or maybe even 300 million DAOs might not be a reality for you. You need a scale in order to make something like this thrive, in order to really be able to use the first-party data in the right way, in the best way possible. And not to mention the return on investment. You really need a lot of volume in order to really be able to get your money back. But perhaps the most important aspect of it all is the complexity involved in building all the stuff. Each game, each publisher is different from the other. And what we're talking about here is that, okay, we have to have scale. But in order to have scale, unless I'm a massive publisher or I'm a big ad tech conglomerate, and I can force people to use my product, well, unless I'm one of those, then how am I going to be able to create scale? Well, you need a common language. But each publisher and each developer has a different game. Each game is different. Each user even is different. But how can we make them communicate? How can we translate certain behaviors that we can then, find patterns in order to serve the relevant advertising? And even those publishers that have, managed to build their own systems, and there are some very successful publishers that have done that, even they have to admit that all they have done is limited to their own users. They can't, export, the way that they work with other publishers unless they share with the world the way that their systems work. And not to mention the incredibly hard task I'm finding to bring advertisers and publishers together. Literally herding cats. They will do whatever they want whenever they want. Game developers are not bothered by doing this. And we haven't even talked about the very last, very real problem, which is around security and compliance. Anytime you are dealing with data, and anytime there is a data shift between countries, between one server to another, or between one device to another even, there's enormous risks for the developer. And you have to lawyer up, you have to really understand the legislation, you have to stay on top of the legislation in order to really be able to be a leader in this space. Especially considering that your data is your advantage, why would you then go through the whole trouble here in order to make this stuff available? No wonder no one's really doing it. No one's really challenging the way we are doing things right now because it's too bloody hard. So it's just easier to just give your dollars to those big companies instead of really trying something different. Well, we then thought, how can we, if we're going to do something about this and we're going to try something different, then what are the elements? What are the guiding principles that we need to have? As I mentioned to you, we are here talking about a realignment from working with advertisers and prioritizing all the stuff that we've given to advertisers in the past, working with identifiers that serve their interests. We're here aligning ourselves again with publishers and trying to understand publishers' needs and trying to understand publishers' users and publishers' games. So first and foremost, we have to do right by publishers. We have to make sure that their data is compliant, is secure, that the users have the privacy that they deserve as well. The second tenet would be then we need to make something of this data. If publishers are going to give us an understanding of how their players behave, then we must respond in kind, and we must be able to reveal important information that will generate returns for publishers. And of course, we have to do all this without rocking the boat too much. We can't reinvent the wheel. We're already trying to change here the way things are done around here. So we need to lean on well-established game mechanics. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So these are the three things that we've been thinking about. How can we change the situation that we're in today? Well, we've come up with a system, a very simple innovation, very, very simple. A few bits of code that a developer will then put in their game in order to send us patterns of behavior that are happening within their game. So if a user is progressing within the game and completed a level, for example, we can learn that. If a user is spending money in a certain way, we can learn about that. If a user likes to hoard items, for example, we know about that. If they like to watch ads, these are all information that can be mapped out across the game and then can be sent to us. Once we receive this information, we're then able to cohort it and then test creatives against a particular cohort. Because advertisers they're not really interested, I want X user. No, I want users that demonstrate a behavior that's most likely to convert within my game. So it doesn't matter if it's Mary, Joseph, or Jesus. It matters that the player that demonstrates a certain behavior. This is the crucial aspect here. We have managed to create a common language that is simple to implement, that maintains players' anonymity, and at the same time stands by publishers. And the really cool thing is that we have made it available for everyone. So we've solved the problem of scalability because we're building the ad tech part of things. We've built a server, we've built a bidder. We've solved also the complexity problem with our game tags. We simplified the language. Now all publishers can speak the same language by using our game tags, and we can use that to generate the relevant sites, solving thus the third problem, the performance problem. We can now, by serving more relevant advertising, without identifying the players, we can now generate better returns for publishers that are monetizing with us and give advertisers better audiences for them to acquire. And all of this is already possible. Without, very important to remember, without identifying a user, because everything happens on the publisher side. We cohort the players and keep their anonymity. But thinking about this, of course, gave us, opened up our brains to a whole lot of things, that we can do once we started to align ourselves with publishers and work very closely with publishers. Now, we only talked about here the privacy-first advertising. How can you use first-party data to generate better results and returns on advertising? There's also opportunity to mediate the mediators, see the price before and try to sort of bring some transparency to what has become a very, very opaque industry. And last, we can also look into ways that we can become even closer to publishers, give them a stake in the future of the network, of the industry, so that we avoid a situation where in 10 years from now, we are in the same problem that we have today. This is what I had to share with you today. I hope it was interesting to understand a little bit more how we believe the first-party data really is the killer app for mobile advertising for the next few years. If you have any questions, I have to take some now. I believe we might have some time.
Yeah, we have a little bit of time.
If there's any questions now. If not, thank you. I'm going to be at booth G3. Come and speak to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.